The Tower of True Skill is the game's most popular first Remorseless, so it would be very unusual to hear someone saying that they do not think it is a very good idea as a first Remorseless. So I will definitely need to give a few reasons why. As I mentioned a few moments ago in the video, there are a lot of choices as a first Remorseless. So when you are choosing True Skill as your first Remorseless, you have to perform jumps that are considered nearly impossible. As a person who has beaten Vanos Tower, I would definitely say this was one of the hardest sections of Vanos Tower. And Vanos Towers are soul crushing, and this isn't even a part of one of the main parts of Vanos Tower. I know you can high jump skip some of the wraparounds, but as you can see, I clearly got frustrated with this tower in the video. Spent over 100 minutes just to complete this tower. And because this is rated one of the easiest Remorseless towers in the game, at the end of every section, I will be comparing this tower to see if it is easier or harder than True Skill. I think True Skill is a really good second Remorseless, however, you should not have to go through how hard this floor is just to beat a Remorseless tower. There are other Remorseless towers in the game that feel really easy compared to this. Absolutely does not challenge you as much as this tower does. These wraparounds are pushed to the absolute limit. Completing Tower of True Skill as your second Remorseless is a really good idea to get better at wraparounds, because it is the most frequent skill used in any JToH tower today. However, it's already been over 3 minutes into the video and I am dragging this on slightly too long, so let's start the recommendations. This is Tower of Astral Fusion, a Remorseless tower in Zone 6 that has a safety net every single floor. Even the badge description for this tower says it is a tutorial first Remorseless. However, because of this, the raw gameplay is slightly harder than usual, and this leads to one massive problem in this tower, this outside section on floor 6. This is one of 2 outside sections in this tower, and if you fall, you have to restart the tower. However, with a lot of practice, this outside can be easily mastered, and it only has a couple of jumps. The final floor of this tower is also safety netted, but instead of being permanently safety netted, it gives you 3 lives before the safety net disappears. Now, one final question before I end this section off. Is this tower easier or harder than True Skill? And my answer to that question is, this tower does have harder raw gameplay than True Skill. However, because of the safety nets, this tower would take you less time and would be therefore easier to complete than Tower of True Skill overall. When I beat this tower for the first time, it personally only took me 3 hours. This is Tower of Forever Sleeping Flower in Ashton Tower Works. This tower's raw gameplay is very easy for a Remorseless and has a safety net halfway through. This tower has a final stretch which I won't show, which is also all safety netted, and unlike other final stretches, if you fail it, you get sent back to the tower, instead of falling and having to restart the whole thing from the beginning. I don't have much to say for this tower, but unlike Astral Fusion, the safety net does not make the tower's difficulty significantly harder in any way. This is quite a learning tower with lots of mechanics, so I'd highly recommend practicing this tower before attempt. But if I had to say whether this tower was easier than Tower of True Skill or not, I would definitely say yes. However, this tower is very different from Tower of True Skill and Tower of Astral Fusion. This tower is more mechanical based and has a lot more current objects than Astral Fusion and True Skill. Astral Fusion and True Skill has a lot more wraparounds, so if you're not very good at wraparounds, I would highly recommend you try this tower instead. Tower of Triple Jeopardy is a really good first Remorseless. In fact, it is currently the second easiest rated Remorseless, just behind True Skill, as of recording this video. Unlike most towers, the tower's music was composed and created by the tower's creator itself. Unlike the last two towers though, this tower is quite punishing and does not have a safety net at all. However, because of this, I would say the raw gameplay was quite easy. One of the flaws in this tower as well is entirely safety netted, only having to worry about 9 floors. This tower's gameplay style and difficulty is very strange, because I don't know whether to say it is a very learny tower, or if the difficulty comes from the wraparounds. But what I can definitely say about this tower is that I struggled with the truss flicking a lot more than anything else in the tower. This ladder section on floor 5 in particular definitely had the most trouble with. But do I think this tower is easier than True Skill? Similarly with Tower of Forever Sleeping Flower, I absolutely do think this tower is easier to complete than Tower of True Skill. This might be a bit of a weird one to some of you, because this tower is currently rated as bottom to low Remorseless instead of bottom. But this is Tower of Dash Destruction in Zone 4. This tower is very learny, however, once you know how to do the sections in practice, this tower becomes very easy. This tower is very consistent at getting to the later floors and has a safety net higher up. One of the reasons this is Remorseless in the first place is this outside section on floor 9, and if you fall you have to restart the whole tower. It is not safety netted at all. However, that is not the main problem with this tower. This wraparound in particular is very hard. Like I said, this tower is severely learning based. However, when you get the hang of how to do some of the sections, this tower becomes very easy and consistent. So, do I think this tower is easier than True Skill? I don't think this is easier than True Skill, but it all comes down to learning the mechanics of this tower, so it could definitely take a lot longer than True Skill, but for me at least. Now, I know both of these towers I'm going to talk about next are locked away and require you to complete a Remorseless tower already to unlock them. However, I think they are really good potential second or third Remorseless towers, so I'm still going to talk about them anyway. This is Tower of Beat Block Berserk, and it could potentially be the game's easiest Remorseless tower. Unlike some of the other towers in this video though, this tower has absolutely no safety nets. However, this tower is really short and is definitely one of the shortest Remorseless towers in the game, so it could definitely make up for it. Every section in this tower seems to have a part that is significantly harder compared to the rest of the floor. Punishing in this tower. So, do I think this tower is easier to complete than Tower of True Skill? Absolutely, compared to floor 9 of True Skill. This tower was easier than Tower of Beat Block Berserk for a while. What I found interesting was this tower was actually submitted as challenging difficulty. The first few floors of the tower begin at around intense difficulty, even easier than JToH Berserk. However, the tower significantly spikes up on the later floors, becoming increasingly more difficult as you progress through the tower. This tower has similar wraparound gameplay to Tower of Astral Fusion and Tower of True Skill. However, the raw gameplay is not as hard as Astral Fusion, as it is less safety netted and more punishing. Part of the reason why this tower is so difficult and so much harder than JToH Berserk is because of this last outside section. There's a final stretch in this tower where if you fall you have to restart the whole thing from the beginning, and that can be severely punishing. Compared to JToH Berserk, this tower definitely has much easier gameplay throughout than compared to JToH Berserk. However, JToH Berserk is significantly shorter and much more consistent. Even though this tower may look much easier, JToH Berserk is definitely much more consistent to beat. So, is this tower easier than Tower of True Skill? Now, this is a very hard question because this tower is very similar to Tower of True Skill. Tower of True Skill is probably easier than this, but in my opinion, at least, I definitely would rather beat this tower instead. This is Tower of Extreme Dystopia in Zone 1. This tower, however, is probably the first tower I can guarantee that is definitely harder than Tower of True Skill, and I can definitely say this is not bottom Remorseless. Because the raw gameplay in this tower is like Astral Fusion, and it is significantly harder, and there are no safety nets either. And there's even a soft lock on one of the later floors in the tower. However, I still thought it was a really good idea to include this tower in this video, because this tower is an 8-floor tower. Yes, that is right. 2 of the floors in this tower are either hard difficulty or easier. This is floor 7. It is a walk until the next floor with a teleporter at the end. And this is floor 10, with a few jumps until the end with a 12-stud safety net as the last jump of the tower. However, as a result of all of this, there is a soft lock, as I mentioned earlier. Do I think this tower is easier than True Skill? Absolutely not. There's a 10-stud wraparound and a 0.1 stud jump on the screen. However, if you are already struggling with floor 9 of True Skill, and you think you can take on the challenge of just 8 floors in this tower, this isn't a bad first Remorseless. This is Tower of Really Nasty Ideas, the other easier Remorseless tower in Zone 1. Unlike Extreme Dystopia, however, this is the complete opposite. This tower is really long, and an average run would take about 30 minutes to complete. If you thought this tower's raw gameplay would be really easy, but really long, then that's wrong, because this tower's raw gameplay is not only harder than Extreme Dystopia, it is 10 floors and a lot longer too. However, there are quite a few safety nets in this tower and a lot of button progress. Meaning, if you fell to the bottom a couple of times, the button progress would make the tower slightly shorter. This tower uses other ways to make difficulty, and it's kind of a learning tower too. In my opinion, I would say this was only ever so slightly harder than Extreme Dystopia, and a lot of the gameplay feels easier than True Skill. So would I say Tower of Really Nasty Ideas was easier than Tower of True Skill? Absolutely not. But if you were going to beat this as your first Remorseless, it is still quite a good idea. The tower's soundtrack as well is really intense and intimidating, which if you're going to do this as your first Remorseless, it may start to increase your heart pressure like no other tower has done before. I don't really have too much else to say about this tower, so moving on. This is Tower of Niflheim from Ring 6, and this was personally my first Remorseless. This tower can be really similar to Extreme Dystopia in terms of difficulty. However, this and Extreme Dystopia are perfect to do before or after True Skill. I wanted to complete this tower before True Skill because it has the nice addition of safety nets every few floors. I also felt as if this tower would be easier to complete than Tower of True Skill. When I was completing this tower for the first time, I definitely struggled with the first 3 floors the most. Floor 4 and floor 5 feel really easy compared to True Skill. I also spent a lot of time trying to pass floor 6, but soon after I passed floor 6, I fluked the rest of the tower. Floor 7 is also entirely safety netted, so you can't fall too far. Like the main reason the higher you get in the tower, the more intense the tower's atmosphere I don't know about anyone else, but that definitely made my heart rate skyrocket. And I'm not even playing the tower. This tower gives you an emotion with the music, no other tower does. And I feel like your heart rate would increase the most if it was your first Remorseless. And by not completing this tower, it feels like a missed opportunity. It's a feeling that's hard to explain, so I'm gonna move on. This is Tower of Never-Ending Dizziness in Ring 7. Already, I'd like to mention, if you don't want to consider this as your first Remorseless, I'd still highly recommend you beat this tower, as it can gain you a lot of skill at spinning platforms if you're not very good at them. This is probably the most mechanical based first Remorseless of the video. However, this tower does not use any special mechanics. Unlike a lot of mechanical based towers which are quite learny, most of the mechanics in this tower are just spinners. However, that might not be the only thing to consider when doing this as a first Remorseless. This is floor 4 outside. Although it is one of the longest floors of the tower, it is entirely safety netted, so you do not have to worry about it at all. And the floor after that is floor 5, which is a break floor and by far the easiest floor in the tower. I also can't help but mention the first 3 floors of this tower are incredibly easy, mostly intense difficulty gameplay. The tower starts to significantly ramp up in difficulty on the later floors. However, floor 9 is also like floor 4, it is almost entirely safety netted. And the raw gameplay in the beginning feels rather easy too. However, how long you spend on this tower all comes down to how much you struggle with spinners. So do I think this tower is easier than True Skill? Now this is incredibly debatable. So I'm going to be comparing this tower with Tower of Niflheim first. If you think you will struggle less with Tower of Niflheim, that would mean you would struggle with spinner gameplay overall, but if you think this tower is easier, then you might find spinners to be easier. Because you could struggle with spinners far less than wraparounds, but I would say, for the majority, that Tower of True Skill is easier than Tower of Never-Ending Dizziness. Before I end off this section, I just wanted to quickly mention, just like the last two towers, the last few floors have incredibly intimidating soundtrack. Now, most people have the soundtrack off in the tower, so me saying this might mean nothing to people, but the soundtrack definitely helps with the intensity of the tower, so you can far more enjoy the tower's experience. Like, for an example, on Really Nasty Ideas, if you were going to complete a tower with not a very intimidating soundtrack, you would feel very calm towards the end. However, if the last few floors have an incredibly intimidating soundtrack, then you might start to feel the emotion of the song. It's quite hard to explain, so I'm going to move on. Now, similarly to Tower of Really Nasty Ideas, this tower is harder than to have Triple Jeopardy, and it's much longer. However, this tower is far more safety netted than Tower of Triple Jeopardy, and definitely way less punishing higher up. This is Tower of Tallying Every Mistake in the Lost River. This tower is kind of similar to Tower of Dance Dance Destruction, but it isn't learning in any way. It uses lots of interesting mechanics throughout the tower, but none you don't need to worry about too much or practice. If I had to say what were the most difficult parts in this tower, it would definitely be some of the purest gameplay. There's a lot more wraparounds in this than Dance Dance Destruction. I think this and Dance Dance Destruction should swap around in difficulty, and this be bottom to low instead. This has very hard wraparounds. I don't personally remember too much about this tower, so if I had to say if it was harder than True Skill or not, it's definitely a lot longer, but I don't know if the gameplay is any harder than True Skill, so I have absolutely no idea. But what I can say is that it might be slightly easier than Really Nasty Ideas.
Attention, all Roblox gamers. Is in big trouble, and he needs your help to take down JToH himself. To do this, he's going to need a band hammer and a couple of million. To help him, all he needs is your... Actually, you know what? Scratch that. He's going to need everything that you own. I'm talking everything. Pets, your house. I'm talking about your Minecraft diamond armor, and, well, I can go on and on. He's absolutely...
Sorry about that, I don't know what I was doing there. Anyways, this is quite the Remorseless tower. At least in my opinion, this tower is the easiest Remorseless in the game and was intense for a very long time. But don't get your hopes up, because the gameplay is neither wraparound based or mechanical based. The gameplay, to say the least, is really weird and has a lot of traps. Essentially, if you are unfamiliar with traps, they are can-collide false platforms, which can-collide false means you can fall through them and you will have no idea you just fell through the platform. So the whole reason why I think this is the easiest Remorseless altogether is because it has not one but two safety net sections on this tower. So does that mean the raw gameplay for this tower is going to be significantly harder? No. Not only does this tower have lots of safety nets, the raw gameplay is also really easy for Remorseless. One thing I can definitely say about this tower though is that floor 4 and floor 5 being the safety net floor, are probably some of the hardest and most frustrating floors of the tower. If you fall anywhere on this safety net, on this floor or the next, You have to spend so long to wait to be able to heal. And even using healing items here would deal more damage than healing. Unless you had crystals for completing the arcane area. So I would consider falling here a practical soft lock. I didn't really speak too much about Tower of Never-Ending Dizziness or some of the other final flaws in the towers I've mentioned, but like Never-Ending Dizziness, this tower has a final floor with lots of spinners. Or rather should I say, a giant spinner of doom that covers the whole final floor, and if you mess it up, it's back to the beginning of the video. So this is tab glitching and healing in Ring 5, and I definitely won't have much to say about this because I wouldn't personally recommend this as a first Remorseless myself. However, I still thought I would include this in the video because some people might want to do this as their first Remorseless, and it was easier than True Skill for a while. The tower's gameplay is definitely very unique, and the way it makes its difficulty is very unique as well. A lot of the difficulty in this tower comes from glitches. The wraparounds and purist gameplay is not too hard either, however, the consistency when beating this tower is definitely much harder than towers such as Tower of True Skill, Extreme Dystopia, and Niflheim, and I would definitely put this, or say the difficulty of this tower was at the harder spectrum of bottom to low Remorseless. There is a safety net on floor 9 of this tower, really late into the tower, however, you have to do a whole soft lock side of the tower to be able to reach the safety net section. So it is not guaranteed safety with this safety net because there is another outside section on the final floor of this tower, and if you fail it, you get sent back to the very bottom of the tower. Okay, by any means, please do not do this as your first Remorseless. I have absolutely no idea why I put this on the list. This tower is probably one of, if not the longest non-citadel, the longest tower in the entire game. The only factor this tower has being a really good first Remorseless is that I know I've said this tower has the easiest Remorseless gameplay a couple of times, but when I've said that, I might have been exaggerating, because this tower is not only intense, it is challenging gameplay. Challenging gameplay for an entire hour and a half straight. It is so long. If you do not know anything about this tower though, the second half of the tower is significantly shorter. You can do it in under 5 minutes. But the first half, floor 4 and floor 5 especially, take about an hour and a half to complete. Well, that concludes this video. There might have been some towers that I might not have included in this video, and that's because either I have not beaten them yet, so I don't know what they're like, or I might not recommend them as a first Remorseless. Sorry that I might have sounded really tired when making this video, but I actually really enjoy putting this video together, and the recording software I use to make videos might make me sound slightly different. I will put a table of results on the screen to categorize how I felt about each and every Remorseless tower and when you should consider doing them. I want to thank you for watching this video. I don't feel like I didn't explain myself very well when I was describing some of the towers, but I hope I tried my best, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya.